Today, I am pleased to feature literally two of the most impressive and smartest people I've ever met. Trust me when I say these two operate on a different plane than the rest of us. They think huge thoughts and are working to solve some of society's most pressing issues on a global basis. I promise you will leave today thinking, wow, who knew? And you will also leave smarter and more inspired than you arrived. First, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. And in this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those along the way as possible. And please make sure that your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thank you to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, and Project Music. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back an early alum of this series, Shain Shapiro. Shain is a globally recognized thought leader at the convergence of music, culture, and urban policy. This is showcased in his debut book called This Must Be the Place: How Music Can Make Your City Better, due out on Repeater Books in September of 23. Shain has defined a new way to think about the value of music in cities and places, and through it has influenced over 120 cities and places to invest in music and culture as founder and executive chairman of Sound Diplomacy, and the founder and executive director of the not-for-profit Global Center for Music Ecosystems. He's authored authoritative reports on the role of music in cities, tourism, the nighttime economy, real estate, and recovery, including the most extensive guide to music and the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, ever written, in partnership with the United Nations. He's spoken to hundreds of global conventions, such as South by Southwest and the UN World Urban Forum, and has delivered the first ever TEDx talk on music's role in cities. Shain holds a PhD from the University of London and currently lives in East London. And joining Shain as today's featured guest is Gina Lucarelli. Gina stewards the world's largest learning network on sustainable development through the Accelerator Labs, 91 social innovation labs embedded in the United Nations Development Program. She's been working on human rights and development work for over 20 years and feels like she's just getting started. A systems thinker, designer, and fixer, she leads, learns from, and creates space for experiments that tackle complex development problems and the new categories and opportunities they create. She's focused her development work on Asia, Eastern Europe, and most recently, Africa. She writes, talks about, and is always looking for ways to tap into collective intelligence, learn from grassroots knowledge, and drive continuous R&D to transform the systems that will determine whether future generations will be able to meet their development needs. It is an honor to welcome these two global rock stars to our platform. Take it away, Shain.
Thanks, Tom. How intimidating, as always. I really appreciate everyone joining us. This is a bit of a left of center one, I think. But Gina, thanks so much, for joining us on this, or for joining me on this. And I guess my first question, let's take it back to the start and just kind of, introduce yourself personally first before professionally, where you're from, and kind of how did you end up working for the UN before we talk about some of the stuff that you do at the UN?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name's Gina. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, which has a musical connection. You know that Cleveland was the first place where a DJ was about to play a song, and he said, "Let's rock and roll." So that's why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is in Cleveland. It's a little bit of a music connection there. And yes. Hi, Glenn. Yeah, so I got started in international work. I always wanted to travel. I think that was kind of how it started. And right after college, I wasn't particularly useful for much. So I went, sorry. So I kind of went to Thailand. Funnily enough, they let me teach English in a university, even though I wasn't really much of a teacher, but I did speak English. So that was a really fun experience, kind of teaching English to people who this generation, they were like the first generation to go to college, and many of them, spoke basic English. So, and I spoke Thai at the time. So that was kind of how I got started. And then I started doing work in community development and going from there. I came to New York to do my graduate studies, and started hanging around the UN and working with UNICEF and child protection. And yeah, I kind of grew from there.
Yeah, it's been a crazy learning experience for me as well. So, I have no experience in international development or international relations. I'm the same. Most of my job has been built around wanting to travel and trying to see the world and getting someone else to pay for it. But I have been lucky just through a series of chances, and we can talk about to be involved in a lot of United Nations related activities. And I kind of want to get into, I know Tom loves it when we talk about everything, and I promise we'll get there, Tom, but I just want to make sure that we have enough time to really dig into what you do, but not just what you do, what everyone around you does. And I'll kind of interrupt you from time to time. And then we're going to get into how music fits into this, because obviously I'm sure everyone's wondering, how does music fit into this? I promise you guys it does. And I'm really hoping that you'll see a slightly different way that music has fitted into it. But can you, kind of dumb it down for me, because you know me, I need things dumbed down to understand them. What is the UNDP, first off? And then what is the UNDP Accelerator Labs as different to the UNDP? And while you do that, I'm going to put into the chat a few links for people to check it out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the United Nations Development Program, that's the acronym there, is part of the United Nations that works on sustainable development. So it's a large organization, about 17,000 employees across 170 countries, with about a $5 billion a year budget. And essentially, it works on reducing poverty, increasing access to justice, preserving biodiversity, improving gender equality, all the kind of big goals of the day to make the world a safer, more inclusive, more just place. That's the United Nations Development Program. It's been around since the 1960s, which is relevant to why music is connected. So plunk that, think 1960s when we get to the connection of why you're talking to me today. And essentially, since the 60s, obviously the world is kind of changing at a faster and faster pace. Things are getting more and more intertwined and complex, right? You've got both droughts, and countries are dealing with both droughts and floods. You've got a lot of amplification of extremist views. You've got ecosystem collapse. You've got extreme weather. You've got hunger. You've got disease.
We don't have any of that now, though. We're good.
It's all good. It's all good now.
We've solved all those problems. Yeah.
So something about, the pace of change on the outside started to look faster than the pace of change on the inside, which is always a sign that, you've got to do something differently. So that's why the United Nations Development Program set up these things that they call accelerator labs. And they kind of went big with the idea. This is the idea of like bringing innovation into sustainable development work, sometimes digital solutions and other ones.
And so who pays for it? And like, how does it literally work? If you, And I promise I'm asking you this for everyone's benefit, because again, we're going to get to the music. I promise we're going to get to the music.
Yes. So I will also thank our sponsors and investors, the Qatar Fund for Development, and the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. They are the founding investors. They were very, very bold. They made a bold investment, not knowing exactly what this thing would do. It was a very non-traditional kind of investment.
And this is fairly normal. A lot of national governments or sovereign wealth funds will put a pile of money into a particular UN program for a particular reason. And right. And
Yeah.
often this money getting assigned to development can go to really anything. So long as it is supporting the development of a place and of the people that live there. So,
Yes. I mean, many
yeah,
donors give to, the United Nations as core donors, right? So Sweden and others are kind of like our biggest donors. And this was a particular sort of angle, which was, we're not, we kind of have the feeling that it's a moment of planetary crisis. And it might be the moment for exploration and experimentation and unleashing new ideas and trying something which may or may not work. But we're either bold or desperate enough in the moment to give it a go.
Yeah. So what do so we set up you set up these accelerator labs. The word accelerator and the word labs mean particular things in my world and in the music world. And what does that so what are they? How do they work? What do they do?
Right. So I don't know what accelerator and labs mean in the in the music industry, but basically it's been kind of a growing phenomenon in governments and in the public sector to like put a space around to kind of create a space of freedom for new ideas, and you call that a lab, right? So it's usually like, yes, we're going to continue with our core business, but we're going to try something weird over here. So the famous story of this is, in the private sector, Netflix, right? So back in the day, if you remember sending those CDs back and forth to Netflix, that was their core business. And they had like a little lab project on the side where they were like, I don't know, try this cloud thing, right? Eventually the cloud, and people sort of laughed at them and said, ha, 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 lucky you get to play around. We're busy, sending the CDs back and forth. Eventually the cloud thing becomes their core business and replaces it. So it's kind of a space where you try out new things. Maybe they stick, maybe they don't. And by accelerator, sometimes what's meant is like, you accelerate a startup, right? Or you incubate a startup, right? Sort of fund them and help them grow.
That's
what
the same in music. It's the same in music. But and how do you guys do it? Because first off, you're in a lot of places, right?
Yes.
How many of them are there?
So there are 91.
91. All right. I didn't want to get it wrong.
Africa, Latin America, Middle East, Asia, Eastern Europe, in small island states and what we call least developed countries. So countries that have a lot of economic and environmental shock. So
in 91 countries, the UNDP is investing in these accelerator labs. And what are they doing in these countries? Like walk me through one of them potentially.
Yeah. So broad stroke, their mandate is to reimagine, sustainable development for the 21st century. That's, those are kind of like big words. But what they'll do is they'll test out, one of the main things they do, and kind of like our core mantra, if you will, is to learn from people closest to the problems we're trying to solve, right? So to reverse this knowledge that we're the experts, we come in with an investment, we run a project, you participate in our project, and then, your welfare is better, or you're safer, or your, water resources are more protected. This is a total flip to say, you guys know best, let's learn from you. So that's kind of largely what they do. So what they do can vary. And honestly, there are 91 of them. So I have to say, like, every day I'm learning another strange thing that these accelerator labs do. And I'm kind of fascinated with constantly following them. I was just talking last week to the team from South Sudan. So South Sudan, it's very cash based. And so if you want to transfer money, you kind of need to send it to like Cairo and Dubai and Khartoum. And, this is all somewhat insane for the remote areas that people are living in. What they did is digitize this like community savings system. So this is just a system where you put, women would put money into a bank and then you can borrow from it to pay school fees or medical bills or whatever. They digitized the process and have kind of tested it out, de-risked it a little bit for the mobile company that is now ready to like build a service out for this. So that's the team in South Sudan, recently. That is something
when I was in Rwanda, I got drunk with the basketball team. The tallest, like most physically impressive human beings I have ever come across, the South Sudanese basketball team.
Oh, really? So
like it was like two of me was one of them. Like, but like when I learned about you, so again, it's a shout out. There's one of our attendees, Lorena, who works with you. How this started is I met Lorena on one of these, and the UNDP is involved in the development of the Belgrade Symphony Hall. So one of the things that a lot of people that I learned was that the UNDP, the word developer actually means something, because the UNDP is developing things like, and when I learned about the accelerator labs, where you're kind of essentially people are hired to find stuff in ideas and inventions and in 91 countries and help bring these ideas, inventions, stuff, whatever it is, to fruition, it just blew my mind. But I'm curious, kind of like, is that like what are the kinds of things, I'm just saying a couple of things that have blown you away, dealing with, whether it's South Sudan or I know Malawi or Colombia or the Philippines. These are all places, by the way, that I've been lucky to speak to and work with. I'm going to do the segue into music after that and explain how we discovered that there was a bit of a challenge in all of this that music could help solve.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is, these labs have total freedom as to what they work on. We just tell them, go out and find problem solvers out there and put them on the map, learn from them, see them, and let's amplify them. So the things they can come up with are, quite random, to use a Gen Z term, a reappropriated Gen X term, actually. There are a lot of patterns that kind of blow my mind around plastic, like you were talking the circular economy, right? Using plastic as a design input. So like in Ghana, they use them to make floor tiles, and in Uganda for roof tiles, and in Nepal, they make roads from them. And Vietnam, they use single-use plastic bags, mix them with aluminum, and make tables out of them. So this is sort of, you look at it and you go, wow, here are people that they're the future among us, right? They're looking at the plastic problem not as, oh, what a shame and how sad. They're going, well, this is a design input. I can build something from this. And you start to see that as a pattern across all these countries, and you go, wow, maybe there is some hope. That it blows your mind when you have a moment of hope, I think, is what I would say.
Oh yeah, and I know that you guys keep a record of every kind of solution, you call it, right, that you guys have discovered. And sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I'll log in and just look at all the thousands and thousands of things that can make the world a better place that you guys have discovered. Well, that the solution mappers, as you call them, right, the people on the ground in each of these countries have discovered. And I know that Lorena, who's there, I know that there have been some, before my time working with you, there was some musical initiatives as well, right? There were some songs that were created and a few kind of musical solutions, right? I think few and far between, but there were a few.
Yes. Well, we have, I think in Kenya, the lab team early on was working on sort of reducing youth unemployment, and they were looking at creative industries as a potential growth area. I know that the lab in Niger, in Niamey, when they launched, they composed a song which they played at their launch. So this was a sort of early musical link. Another one, which is a little bit remote. So we're working with people across 91 countries. So we've got a weekly meetup. which is at weird hours of the day, but the best we can do. And we have, because you never know what time of day it is for people, we have this sort of intro and outro thing where we play music on our Zoom calls. And then we've got a designer on our team who, took the United Nations Development Program, UNDP logo, and turned it into UNDJ. So when you chair one of these weekly calls, you are the DJ of the call. You choose an intro and an outro. And so we kind of try and integrate music to to connect people, to wake people up, to, reinforce a theme.
Yeah. Well, again, it brings everyone together, and to give you guys, the how we met was I'm the founder of this company called Sound Diplomacy, and we work with cities all over the world trying to get them to engage with music. And last year, I took a slight step back and I've set up this new nonprofit called the Center for Music Ecosystems, because I noticed that just because I get one city to care, it doesn't mean the neighboring city is going to care. And there's like a whack-a-mole system where you have to say the same thing over and over and over again. And I felt that there was a bit of a language that we hadn't created where we could explain how music works and why it matters. And then meeting Lorena and chatting with you, we discovered this amazing use case where, and please interrupt me, Gina, on this one, because I'm not the UN expert, but how did it work prior to when we started meeting? So when you find something on the ground, right, whatever it is, a solution mapper, they're called, right, finds someone somewhere and helps them create something. Did they had to sign an agreement with the UN, right? And how and what happened during that? Like, because now we're kind of segueing into how music is helping to solve a problem, or at least I hope it is. So yeah.
Well, basically, I mean, at the very kind of zoom out level, we have a problem. Innovation is very connected to intellectual property, right? So classical economics teaches you that it's the firms that innovate and the customers take it or leave it. And the best way to grow innovation is to protect ideas, right? And protect innovators, right? This is now being challenged in a world which is more and more open source. It's controversial and it's fraught with debate as to what's best. But we're starting to see, there are other economists, Eric von Hippel and others, who are saying, wait a minute, there is an economic value to letting ideas flow freely, right? If you put your code on GitHub, other people maintain it for you and improve it and build on it, so it's not, so there's a kind of big picture connection between innovation and intellectual property that we were sort of struggling with. Then you have Lorena Sander, who we're talking about, but she's not shown here, but we will embarrass her a little bit. So she met you on this remote panel in the middle of lockdown during COVID. Open source. Yep. You're on the side of open source. It is a very fierce debate. And yeah. She was working with our team at the time, and she was kind of feeling the pain points, right? Multiple pain points. So basically what's happening is we're saying, okay, we want to learn from people and see what ideas they've got out there, and see not only what ideas, but like what prototypes, what products, who's out there solving problems. We bring them in, and then time after time, we want to maybe help them, give them a little bit of money to like validate their experiment, maybe buy some equipment to, measure whether or not black soldier flies are actually a good substitute for animal feed in Togo, right? It's a modest investment, a few $100s or something. And the challenge we have was our policy on intellectual property. That was the pain point. So the pain point was, again, we were set up in the 1960s, and I think the intentions then were fit for purpose at the time. The intentions were, we operate with donated money, and we sometimes outsource what we do. We don't want to sort of hire a company to develop something and then have that company, we pay them, and then that company turns around and charges, the government of Zambia again to develop the same thing that we just paid them to develop. So the United Nations was trying to prevent a double payment problem, right? We were saying, we want to be in the public domain. These ideas must flow freely. And so at that time, the solution was, okay, when we hire someone to work with us to solve something, we acquire the intellectual property with the intention that we put it back out there and make it free in the world. What has happened since then, of course, is this sort of open source revolution, and the fact that, as technology proceeds and what have you, we don't always even have the capability to access the ideas that we bought, right? So we might not have enough people who can read or write algorithms. So why should we be holding it ourselves?
Yeah, and you bring into the fact as well, there's traditional, indigenous, and other sensitivities towards some of these ideas. When there's as I learned in, I forget where it was, Mexico maybe, or there's a traditional remedy for muscle soreness or something like that, or and then who owns that, and and if that can be taken to market in whatever way. So when I came in, so my argument when I came into you guys was, okay, well, I obviously can't solve this because I'm not clever enough, but I thought that music, and let's take this kind of holistically first, because I know there's some very incredibly brilliant and opinionated people in the room, that music is holistically, if we think about it, it's a piece of property that can be chopped and changed, that multiple people can own, one thing, and that if it's properly tracked and maintained, then the amount of money that gets derived from the usage of that product will reach the people who rightfully own it. I know that that is not the case in many regards in music, but theoretically that is. And my proposal to you and to Lorena, who we keep mentioning, was maybe we could look at music as a case study to help understand how to do this better. And that has begun, nearly 2.5 years of us working together.
Yeah, basically Lorena came to me and she was like, Gina, I got it. We can solve our intellectual property problem. And I was like, what do you need? Let's roll. She was like, we want ideas to flow. We just want recognition and attribution back to the owners, right? So it's like music. And I was like, sounds brilliant, let's go with it. And then, and that was when, we started working with you all at the Center for Music Ecosystems and kind of taking inspiration from an industry that does, you want music heard. You just want attribution back. So that's where
and yeah. So what we did was it's for everybody is a bit of research was commissioned where the first was explaining the music ecosystem or the music economy as it relates to different forms of copyright. And doing a bit of a deep dive on that. Even I learned quite a lot because that is not my expertise actually in the business. Thankfully, we worked with lots of people who do, and then we start to talk to, I think it was 4 or 5 accelerator labs, and we dug into what a potential pain point they had, and it blew my mind. And saying, okay, well, if we apply the fundamentals of how music should work into this, maybe we can determine a way to rewrite the policy that then applies to all the labs, right? And I know I'm fast forwarding quite a bit here, but we're now in the stage of writing that policy and discovering all the challenges that it comes with changing policy at the United Nations. But I kind of wanted to, from your perspective, first off, how far do you think we've gotten with this, and what do you think it's doing, on the ground? What do you think that it is kind of changing things to make it more supportive of the creator, which was the whole point of this in the first place?
Yeah. No, I do think we're making headway. I mean, I think we kind of stated it as a pain point in 2020. Then we started working with you all and understanding the stories, how does it work in Bosnia Herzegovina? How does it work in the Philippines? You know, you talk to, actually, I think Alicia Lopez is from the team in Mexico. I think she's online. So she can probably come in here. I'm not sure the herbal remedy story was from Mexico, but there's a very interesting
Sorry.
other one that is from there. I know it's
There's
hard.
there's 91 of them. Like,
Tell me
you
about
know.
it. Tell me about it. I'm lucky I can follow like half of them half the time. But yeah, I do think we're making, I think that what we were able to do, I mean, you all came in and you kind of took this very thorough approach, of giving us this 400-page report, which, you know,
It's 160 pages.
it was really long.
Fair.
It's very prolific.
Those who know me will realize that's what I'm good at. Really long.
And then we were like,
Doesn't
how
mean to
about
be-
an executive summary? It was like 30 pages. We're like, how about 5?
And there is a 5-page version of this for everyone, by the way, if they
Yes.
want to read it.
Yes.
But
Forthcoming
so
blogs. But yeah, but what that did was kind of, you know, first of all, the thorough approach, you know, I teased you about it, but it was, it put us on solid ground, right? So it meant that someone like me, when I stand before the big decision makers, I could tell the story in a simple way and say, this is serious. We've got, we're trying to promote good ideas in the world, including entrepreneurship and youth innovation. And, you know, we want to unleash ideas because we need everything we can throw at the world that we've got. And our policies are getting in the way, right? And what you also gave us was a way to say, hey, this operates differently when we're working with a startup, right? Or a university.
Yeah.
Or, as
Or-
you say, a grassroots
private
innovator,
company.
somebody in their garage or in their farm who's just tinkering away and got a way for moringa leaf to filter water, right? That person maybe doesn't even, basically they're just solving a problem. They might not even be thinking about, you know, protecting their ideas, or they might be like, sure, if this works for you, go for it. I've got my business here and share willingly. So it gave us a way to like really put this issue on the map and sort of explain it in simple terms. And that was really critical, because it's a growing phenomenon that, there's a bigger story around young people and climate change, where young people are starting to say, stop looking to us for hope and get on it and make the tough decisions. But even with all of there is, growing investment in kind of youth innovators, for climate problems. Do you have an idea?
Yep.
There's these sort of contests and things. Again and again, the issue of intellectual property keeps coming up. And we've got to find a better way of unleashing ideas than the way that we're doing now.
And I think that, that's the thing. I'm going to get to these questions as well now. And then we'll go into some of our bigger, some of the bigger picture ideas. But that was it's the thing that got me up and got me excited. And it's like, it's amazing that music can provide a solution to a problem that affects everybody, right? And I know that within the music industry, sometimes we struggle to provide collective solutions for ourselves. But in this case, we're like, okay, well, once we, now we've even talked, and this is completely, we're not entirely sure that any of this will happen, but this idea of how can we create a tracking mechanism right now so that anyone who creates anything that the UN Accelerator Lab supports, we can make sure that their wishes related to how they want their product or their service or their idea or whatever it is respected. And yet the UN still gets rights to talk about it, to communicate about it, if there's and I guess that kind of comes into a question like Rob Singerman. Hey, Rob, he's a good friend. And, it's a basic question first about the labs, right? Is like, what SDG issues are the labs working with, and kind of other music challenges that you're finding solutions for? And I think he comes from that. So Rob works to democratize lyrics and lyric translations, because lyrics are not universal. As you said, lyrics are based on language, and he's doing some incredible work around that. And so I'm curious kind of how, if you could answer that question about the SDG issues and also issues around language and communication and how you're tackling dealing with those. Well, Gina. Got a
Sure.
question? I think I got there. I think I got a question in there somewhere.
Sounds
Sorry.
good.
It's late here, guys. It's late
No
here,
worries.
in the UK. All right.
And nice to meet you, Rob. Yeah, so well, just first a little bit of the Sustainable Development Goals. The acronym SDGs is kind of a little bit remote, but the Sustainable Development Goals are promises the governments of the world made in 2015, with a timeline of eliminating extreme poverty, that is eliminating people living on less than $2 a day by 2030. Right. They're a very ambitious plan. They were ambitious from the start. And they were kind of progressing along, chugging along with some hope, but not fast enough before COVID. And then COVID hit. And now we're really, in a moment where global poverty is on the rise for the first time in 25 years. So these are promises that kind of governments made on a very broad reaching agenda. And we work across all of them, basically. So they're about, making sure girls go to school, on equal parity with boys. They're about preserving biodiversity. They're about ensuring energy access. There's many people in sub-Saharan Africa who still don't have access to electricity, right? They're wide ranging. And their promises. So the first thing we can all do, kind of call to action moment, is hold our governments to account to deliver on their promises. And the second thing we can do as sort of citizens is look at them as a inspiration for a R&D agenda, right? At this point, we need all ideas possible to get there. And so let's work constructively together to figure out how to do that. So that's the Sustainable Development Goals. We work across them all. There's increasing work in like environmental monitoring, where citizen science is kind of a growing thing, where citizens go out and monitor biodiversity changes, and this then creates a new form of data and information for governments to make decisions on and to react to. There's a lot of that happening, but the work is really across the board on all of them.
And while we're doing the questions, and then I'm gonna talk about a few new ideas, but Stuart, and hey Stuart again, do the labs play in the land of soft diplomacy? So what is the role of diplomacy if there is one, with the accelerator labs?
I think so, because our sort of there's two ways you can go about, getting people who don't otherwise want to do what you want them to do it, right? You can sort of use the stick or the carrot, right? So I guess we very much operate in the land of soft diplomacy. And what we try and do is work with our government partners. We work really closely with government. You'll often find somebody buried in a government department who's kind of like a lone ranger trying new ideas. And then we find them and they go, oh, great. Could we do something together? You do it, you get some momentum, they get more attention and resources, and then, things flow from there. This happened in Uganda. We found sort of one lonely guy who was like, he was the GIS department, trying to say, hey, we can monitor deforestation if we use some technology. And everyone was like, sure, we've got bigger problems, or there's no money for that, or it's not going to work. We started working with him, and then things, he gets attention and momentum, and things sort of go to scale from there. So we definitely operate in like, let's try something together. Let's approach this as, we don't know, you don't know, let's learn. And there's room for failure and all of those sorts of things. And that attracts a lot of people to sort of want to partner with us, because we admit we don't know everything.
And how, even though we were working during the time, but how did COVID impact the labs? Like, how did you guys work? Where were you? Did you travel? I know you were in Turkey last week. I know you're in
travel just
Croatia
shut down
all the time.
Travel
you travel more than I do. So like, what happened to the labs during COVID? And
well,
to your work?
Obviously everything shut down, and of course we lost one woman who was working in the Senegal lab to COVID. She died, but there's certainly close to home impacts, mental health impacts on all of us. But I think it was interesting because, we had the backing to start this crazy idea thing before the pandemic. And before the pandemic, we were sort of like tolerated, like, yeah, go play over there. We're doing the
Yeah.
real stuff. Have a nice time, with
It's-
your.
It's often how I'm treated as well when I kind of bring music into a government.
Right.
Oh yeah, music. It's the gig is great over there. Go
Right.
talk to the culture department. We're doing real economic development. Let me grab my
Exactly.
shovel. So I'm with you.
Exactly. They were sort of like
Yeah.
you and all your fancy horizon
Oh
scanning,
yeah.
sense making, and ecosystems, and like that sounds nice.
Yeah.
You obviously got support of the head of the organization, Akim Steiner, who believes in this. But whatever. The pandemic hits, and suddenly, policymakers are going, we don't know what to do. The supply chains are totally shut down, right? There's no way you can, make the masks and make the face shields because the whole trade is shut down, right? In so many countries. Suddenly, when this moment of crisis, it kind of, in a way, turned into an opportunity for us to try new ideas, because they looked at us and went, well, I don't know, do that thing you do. Like, you tell me what's going on and what's where and who's got the information. And are there people with 3D printers out there that can they make face shields in Tanzania? Okay, yeah, you know where they are? Great. What about robots? Can we use those in the hospitals? Oh, you've got connections to the robotics department at the university? Great. Come on in. So there was this moment of like, we don't know, and you guys seem like you do, wild things, and heck, let's give you a shot.
Yeah, it's fascinating how, again, I had a friend here in London who he runs a festival, and he's always had a lot of challenges. It's not a big festival. It's not Live Nation AEG, but he's had a lot of challenges engaging the local authority until they realized that, he could build a morgue really quickly, and that's a horrible thing to think about, but he got contracted because he has the same skill set, and it is interesting how one of the weird things about COVID I found was a lot of people who were doing kind of transferable skills but not being noticed for it. Suddenly they wake up and like, these skills are actually way more important than we thought they were. And just, I didn't mean to bring the tone down with that anecdote, but someone had to build the morgue.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted, it's like, for me, like, one of the things, and I know I've been talking about this in terms of our work, and then Tom actually had a question for you too. I actually wanted to get to Tom's first, and then I want to present a big idea to everybody, and something obviously that we're thinking about working on is, of the 91 labs, what is one of them that you're most proud of, like, or what is a product that you're most proud of? I know you can't pick a favorite, but I'm asking you to. So.
Yeah, it is really, really tough, but okay. So one of the things I'm proud, honestly, of, as you said, so we set up these labs, we brought in like kind of unusual people into the United Nations, right? Data scientists, ethnographers, artists, designers,
musicians,
exactly, urban planners, etc. And we gave them these lofty titles. You're the head of exploration, you're the head of experimentation, you're the head of solutions mapping. I love that one too, because the fact that we got that one in there always blows me away, and many of the people that I work closely with on this. We were like, okay, we need a person whose full-time job, we need 91 people whose full-time jobs are to go out and learn from women and men who are struggling in poverty and facing the effects of climate change and trying to grow crops on their farms. The fact that we got that through is just like a mystery to me still, right? It's that I'm like wildly proud of, that, I've worked with, many people on this, and it's blows my mind, just that even happened. when it comes to like one sort of story, I like this story from India because it's really interesting. So basically, the lab team in India is just phenomenal. I mean, the competition for who we recruited there was just mind blowing. Thousands of people applied. And the team in India, one of the lab members was reading a report called Slavery from Outer Space.
Mhm.
And it was a report about how satellite data can be used to track places where bonded labor is happening in India. And the idea struck that, wait, the places where there are bonded labor are also the places that are emitting pollution, and we need to shut those brick kilns down, right? They pop up and you don't know where they are. So the lab in India started working with Nottingham University, got access to satellite data, started, mapping both hotspots for child and bonded labor and air pollution. Became the first artificial intelligence project on air pollution in the state of Bihar. And they were able to help the government authorities who are trying to crack down on this, but they don't have enough people and resources. And, it's like the whack-a-mole thing. They keep popping up.
Yeah.
They were able to sort of narrow the range of what they need to monitor from 8,000 to 2,000 potential points, right, of where these brick kilns are. So they help them target their efforts to monitor who's violating not only child labor laws, but air pollution laws. So that story always is amazing to me because it's a story which has a beginning, which is exciting. It does have this kind of what we're talking about here, analogical transfer, right? The inspiration you and Lorena had to say the music industry could help, solve our intellectual property problem, or your friend, the music festival guy who could build a morgue, right? Here, a problem, a solution that's been used for child labor could be used for air pollution. So that's always to me where it's very exciting intellectually, but it also has a story of impact at the end, which I always like.
So, it's a very exciting time for us now. And I had this, I know I've told you this idea, and I'm still trying to think about if it frustrates me that a lot of places do not have, functioning bureaucracies to manage copyright, right? A lot of countries don't have that. And it means that, if an artist is from that country, often they will work with a non-domiciled company to develop their careers. So the money will be extracted from the country. Which makes it even harder to then convince the country to invest in copyright management because we're not showing a return on investment. And, my thought is, what if we could turn music, like we have with other things, into more of a circular economy in places, right? And if we could look at building, recording studios where a certain percentage of the IP that was generated in that studio would remain in a trust to be spent by the people who record in that studio. So over time, maybe an artist will become successful. And then if that artist becomes successful, then the money returns back to the community that incubated that artist. And, for me, that kind of, it's an anecdote, but it's actually something that I'm working on, as you know that. And for me, how the UN, the work that the UN is doing to rewrite its IP policy, I'm curious kind of where you see that heading, and how you see the accelerator programs continuing to engage with creativity and music and culture and so on.
Yeah, I mean, first, just to say, I'm not, in the music business, and I don't know that world, but I definitely know what it's like to try and get good ideas into the world. And very often what you're trying to do is demonstrate a kind of return on investment of something that hasn't been tried yet or hasn't been proven yet. And it sometimes feels like the burden of proof is so much higher, on new ideas than it is for the status quo. And so you're kind of, for lack of quantitative numbers that show you must invest in this, right? Which are often fabricated or whatever. you end up telling stories, right? And you just tell stories, and you get better and better at telling those stories until, like, you hook. On that, I do just want to make a quick plug, by the way, for a documentary that was made about our work, kind of elevating grassroots innovation, and many others work trying to do that. It's called For Tomorrow, and it's on Amazon Prime, but it's also on YouTube. And it follows the stories of three main innovators in Azerbaijan and Vietnam and Sierra Leone. The guy in Sierra Leone is amazing. Emmanuel Aliou basically goes to a landfill and picks up garbage and makes a car from the garbage that runs on solar power. It only goes 15 miles an hour, but still. The thing runs. I mean, obviously this guy's going to do great things. And, you see the tools he works with, but the ingenuity is just amazing, and it's really powerful, and it's worth looking at it.
Yeah, I think it's that optimism, right? I know, like, for me, I have to find reasons to be optimistic about everything.
Yeah.
Right. Because just saying something isn't going to work or being pessimistic is not a solution oriented mentality. I know that a lot of things that I'm thinking aren't going to work, but I'm still optimistic that they will. And I feel like, what is the future to me? To me, the future of the UNDP and of the work you guys do is the Accelerator Labs. I know that it's something that you consistently have to argue for and lobby for to ensure that the funding remains. But and I guess my question is are you, like, what is making you optimistic facing all the challenges that we're facing, and facing all the challenges you said that we were facing in the 60s, and now and I'm writing to you from London, from the UK, which is leading the world in, well, everything right now. We're our country. So it's difficult to be optimistic sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm curious kind of what keeps you optimistic and seeing what's happening with the Accelerator Labs.
Yeah, it's really just the people that we work with. 75% of the people we hired to work in the Accelerator Labs are new to the United Nations. So they come from all these different backgrounds. They're all from the countries in which they work, which is also interesting because a lot of them, they're highly skilled and they kind of came back to their country to do these jobs. Maybe because we gave them those lofty titles and they had no idea what was really waiting for them.
Yeah.
But
head of solutions. How many people in here are Tom, are you a head of solutions? Like
you're a head of exploration.
Right?
I wish I had something like that, right? Like for the United Nations in Zimbabwe, right? But honestly, like, you talk to, like, what makes me optimistic is talking to these people, hearing the kind of stuff they're doing, seeing the passion and creativity that comes, with it, and the just like surprises and the weird rabbit holes they go down, because they have the freedom to do that. There's an incredible guy in Zimbabwe, this Gift Tuli is his name. And, he was a data scientist who worked for British Petroleum. He came back to Zimbabwe to work with the United Nations. So really highly skilled guy. And it's funny because I saw him in early fall in October, and he was like kind of getting obsessed with this specific kind of bird in Zimbabwe that nobody was paying attention to, called the koala bird. And they're crafty and etc. And they're destroying like 70% of the maize and crops of Zimbabwe, which is facing, food security problems, etc. And he kind of started to look at the available responses, and, they're tricky because they'll go on animal reserves, which means you can't cull them there. Nobody actually knows how to solve this problem. So back in October, he was, kind of on this weird rabbit hole, and we're all like, all right, Gift, at this point now, he's working with a Japanese company that might be sort of, doing remote release of like nets to catch these birds to reduce the crop loss that they're causing. He's actually built it out into a program. So, it looks like this lone weirdo who's just obsessed with these birds, and actually he's kind of on the verge of at least trying something new to solve this major problem of Zimbabwe and their agriculture. So that kind of thing is sort of like just seeing the joy people have in those when they get the freedom to try new things, and then just learning from them on what the new things are. Keeps you guessing.
And I had the same, joy, genuinely the same joy kind of with Lorena, who we've said, realizing that this crazy idea that music actually could be a problem solver here. And it turns out that it is. And, we're, as I noticed at the time, the policy is being rewritten right now and being reimagined right now. And there's there's certainly, a lot of interest. And it just demonstrates how, again, the power of thinking differently, but the power of music, like the power of, being obsessed with a bird, like, and it's, I wanted to have you on, and thank you so much, Tom, obviously, for this, to try to offer a different perspective, to show kind of, we talk about the internal issues of the music industry all the time. And I'm always about, music can solve problems, and music is so powerful to so many people outside of the music industry. And here, to me, is a great reason for that. So I know we have 4 minutes left, and right, Tom? So
Pretty much, but you all carry on. I could listen to Gina talk all day long. When I promised the audience today they would have their minds blown, and Gina, you've delivered. I'm small. I'm a small person compared to you guys. You all think big thoughts. You're trying to solve big problems. Meanwhile, I'm worried about what am I going to have for dinner tonight. I feel small.
Well, you don't feel small. That's not the idea. You're more powerful than you know. And that's the idea. I mean, so much of, I often, we sort of, when you're like seized with these global problems, the immediate next question is, well, how are you going to take this to scale? Okay, it works, and go big, like we've been looking at eliminating energy poverty, right, globally. And how do you take those big ideas? And honestly, one of the things I've learned is that it's the small stuff that can get you to scale, right? It's the, do it yourself, wind turbines, and, wild solutions that actually have a better chance of solving big problems, I think, than what we imagine as this, tapping into a big source of private money or top-down solutions. There's some, I can't really articulate it very well yet, but somehow many small ideas actually get you to scale rather than thinking, you need to, when we first looked at eliminating energy poverty, it was, well, this will cost $40 billion. And it was sort of like, well, let's talk to Elon Musk, right? Like he could have done that instead of buying Twitter, right? So, you can think that way, or you can think, wait a minute, we ran basically a campaign looking for energy solutions over 20 weeks. We got 350 solutions from 48 countries. The majority of them are open source, meaning able to share, and the majority of them are products. So you can think about sort of getting to big ideas through multiple small ones. And maybe what you're going to have for dinner tonight is going to inspire something. You don't know.
The same.
I have
Sorry,
one
Tom.
more question, Shane, if you don't mind. Gina, you are obviously a U.S. citizen, and you're doing incredible work. My question is this: do you have colleagues around the world, from Germany, Japan, the UK, Italy, so forth and so on, who are also pulling their weight as hard as you are in these areas? Are there countries that are really kind of over-indexing in that area and some that are laggards?
Definitely. I mean, I think one of the interesting things that we saw, when the governments of the world came together in 2015 and agreed on those big sustainable development goals, it was a big moment for the United Nations. The Pope was there, and Shapiro was there, and all the heads of state were there. And one of the things you realized was actually, and this is a really powerful and important idea, is if you're talking about sustainable development, there's not a country in the world that has solved it. And even if you think you've solved it, you might roll back real quick, on the turn of a dime. So So, sometimes you look at countries in the global north and say, well, they're investing in renewable energies and they've got social protection programs so that, people can take risks and still be okay. And that promotes entrepreneurship. And, what you basically see is that the opportunities for learning, between, Guinea and Sweden are as vibrant one way as they are the other. And I think, to me, that's the most powerful thing about the Sustainable Development Goals, is that this is a universal agenda. It's a universal learning agenda, which doesn't have countries that have got it all figured out, and others that are just ignoring all the knowledge out there. It's not that black and white.
Yeah, I've and again, it's about, to me, it's about going and learning on the ground from people who know their communities, right? And listening and not assuming anything. And it's the same. It's the same with music. It's so many places around the world have amazing music scenes and music communities that just function in a completely different way to ours. That I have learned from Kyrgyzstan. There's quite a good music scene there. I'm learning, to a number of other places that we've got to speak to with the accelerator labs. So, no, well,
one of my colleagues frames it. He's like, what you were doing? We're doing development as listening, instead of sort of development as aid, right? We're listening, and seeing what happens with that, which I think is interesting.
So
Guys, I think we're about out of time. On behalf of the audience, let me thank both of you for the incredible work that you do. Shain, I'm always blown away by you. Gina, it's such a pleasure to now know you, and I hope that you all continue making the world a better place for the rest of us. Because, like I said, I'm worried about what am I going to have for dinner tonight. Come back next week, folks. We're going to have 2 more rock stars. Probably not as smart as these 2, though, I can say. I'm very impressed, and I really am glad that you all are who you are and what you're doing. Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm going to download the chat. Sorry, because it was hard for me to catch up multiple places. But thank you so much, Tom, for the opportunity, and thanks, Shain, for asking the interesting questions.
Try my best. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Gina.
Hey,
speak to you all
watch
later.
that documentary that we put in the chat, folks.
For tomorrow. Check it out. Check it out.
Shake you up. Thank you.
See y'all. Bye-bye.